A very good evening to you and welcome to our special program, Equal Partners Based on Equality. And this campaign was initiated by the National Committee on Women, attached to the Ministry of Women and Child Development in collaboration with Men Engage Alliance, supported by the United Nations Development Programme. And today as well, we have two panelists who will be touching on very important topics. So previously, on our previous episode, we featured two videos on making decisions and my mother does not like me in the kitchen. So today it's going to be different. It's going to be on media and gender-based violence. So first and foremost, let me introduce our panelists. We have with us Senil Banyarachi, who is a member of the Men Engage Alliance Sri Lanka and the co-founder of #Generation. A very good evening to you.
Very good evening.
And we have Bimali Amarasekara, gender specialist, UNDP. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here. Thank you.
And let's move on to the very first video. And today's discussion will revolve around the videos we will be playing right now. So our first video is about media.
How does TV, radio shows and other such social media platforms shape the development of our children? Take a closer look at the male characters that are portrayed on the TV shows these days. If you look at the most of the characters, they are portrayed as violent, rowdy, tough, are often seen consuming alcohol or smoking. Characters lose their temper and control people around them. These are the types of characters we are observing in popular media today. In contrast, aren't women most often portrayed in the media as being controlled by men, engaging only in housework? Even in work environment, they're seen as weak characters. Parents, therefore, we have a responsibility to teach our children of the use of misinterpretation of gender in the media. Next, when we take a look at contemporary cartoons for kids like Suravira Sam, Ben 10, Spellbinder, Spider-Man and Superman, male characters are shown as personalities who can overcome any challenges that come in their way. By following such characters, some boys and men engage in irresponsible and unhealthy actions. These could sometimes negatively affect the development of our sons and daughters. For an example, on a TV show, if a man unnecessarily teases women, it is possible that young boys will try to imitate the same and unnecessarily tease their fellow female classmates. Most of the time, the media shows men purchasing alcohol and cigarettes. This gives space for gender stereotypes, like you are a man, you must drink or smoke. This is the wrong perception. Internet games are very popular among young boys these days. These games primarily contain violence, murder, weapon, giving a rise to a negative perspective. As a parent, we need to be mindful of the types of games we let our children play. We have seen instances where things they have been picked up from such games have had negative effects on their lives. At times, some have even paid with their lives. Let us teach our kids to critically understand media and avoid watching things which have a negative impact on their lives, but rather focus on content that is positive and inspiring. This will be a good start for them to enjoy media in the right way.
That video touched on the role media plays in terms of promoting equality and what the media should be doing in terms of spreading awareness to the youth and also to the kids nowadays in terms of breaking stereotypes. And the next video is about gender-based violence. Let's have a look at that.
My name is Amila. This is my mother, father and little brother, and we live together in our home. This is my true story. My father constantly hits and yells at my mother. This is something that I could not bear to watch on a daily basis. As my little brother watches, I wonder if he will grow up to think that when men get angry, they must be violent, yell and throw pots and pans around the house. Why doesn't our society teach us how to resolve an issue in a peaceful manner? I question myself about this. Why aren't men taught to control and manage their anger? I remember when I was a little boy, constant phrases like men have a natural tendency to be violent, impatient, can't be disciplined, were common around the house. It was said that they get angry at the smallest thing. However, I disagree with that. I'm also a man. When I get angry, I take a deep breath and try to resolve the issue in a peaceful manner. I don't become violent or loud because I felt the repercussions of such actions. One's behavior or impatience shouldn't be based on gender differences. There may not be a change. I think this is what has happened with the world at present. We have given men the permission to release their anger in any way they like. But for women, they need to resort to other ways to calm their anger. No matter how much my father beats my mother, except for crying and pleading with him or complaining about it to the next door neighbor, she has no other response. One day my mother had enough and took us to her family home. But again, always keeping our well-being in mind, we all went back to living with my father. My father's ill treatment towards my mother did not stop. I was against all this violence. I decided to reach out to the authorities to inform them. I made an official complaint to the Ministry of Women and Child Affairs to receive their necessary services and support. My mother thought silently undergoing violence was a part of being a woman. But I showed my mother that we can all seek support and legal help. We don't need to live in fear with violence as a part of our lives. We should all learn to seek help when we need to.
As you just watched both videos, today's episode will focus on gender-based violence and the role media has to play in terms of promoting equality. So we have two personalities, as I did introduce. So first I'm going to talk to Senil. You're someone who's working with young people and you're attached to the Men Engage Alliance as well. So what's your take on the videos you just watched?
Yeah, I think both of those videos are so important, especially as someone who grew up in this country, went to an all-boys school, consumed a lot of media, and now use the internet all the time as well. I see a lot of these harmful stereotypes, and sometimes all of us, I think even myself, I need to take a step back and think about how these stereotypes affect myself as well, and how we can unlearn those stereotypes today as a slightly older person. And I think when those two videos are so important, because a lot of people might agree with the second one, because people condone overt violence, like physical violence. But the first one, maybe some people might not necessarily understand the point it's making, but people don't realize that it's actually the type of stereotypes that we talk about in the first video that actually do the groundwork for the violence that happens in the second video and that we're talking about in the second video. So I think both of those videos are super important, and then I hope a lot of people get to see it as well.
And I want your thoughts on this as a woman and someone who specialized in this as well. And tell us about your take on the videos we just watched, Bimali.
Yes, actually as Senna said, you know, the videos, the media portrays women in kind of demeaning roles or as objects that to be sold or to be seen only for that, not as decision makers, sometimes in videos. Or there's also violence being promoted in some of the films that come from not only the ones that are produced but even abroad. We have that in several films that are shown. So that actually creates that it says it's okay to hit, it's okay to scream, it's okay to do promote violence in the home. It's okay. So it actually society normalizes violence. So that's what happens, and this leads to a kind of inequality in the home, where we give the right to the man or the husband to hit, to abuse the wife or the children or other stepfather, you know, the violence that happens in homes, and for women to be silent and not to speak out. This has happened in there are many families that we actually support through the work we do, and it's unfortunate, especially during COVID time, that because of the lockdown scenario, especially several helplines and the one also that was projected, 1938, reported an increase of calls on domestic violence. So these are situations we really need to address in our community, in our society, in our homes. It's very, very important. So this comes out very strongly in both videos. So as I said, it's connected.
It certainly is connected because, I mean, those cartoons are what we grew up watching, and we don't realize that this kind of plays a role in changing our mindset as to accepting, as I mean, like, I'm a lady, and I probably feel, okay, now this is what the cartoon portrays, so I'm supposed to be like this, and men are powerful. So that's exactly how it's portrayed on all the videos we just watched. So what should be done? Because now this is, I think, something we can't stop when it comes to having cartoons, and it's kind of famous and children grow up watching. So what should be done? I mean, we can make a change, we can do that. So what should be done? I may ask Senel this question.
Sure, I think all of us who are involved in creating content, and I'm also saying this as someone involved in creating content for the internet, have a big responsibility to think about the impact that type of content have, especially on all people, but especially young people. Because I remember being a young boy watching these type of cartoons and then trying to imitate the men in these cartoons. You know, you don't express your emotions, you get violent. And growing up, you need to try and unlearn these things, and you need to spend a lot of time unlearning them. So I think a lot, as people involved in the media, people involved in creating content, have a huge responsibility to think about this, especially in the online media, because a lot of young people use the internet these days, right? Especially with COVID-19, even education, even classrooms now happen sometimes on Zoom and so on. And on the internet, these things are really perpetuated as well. And the same type of violence we saw in the second video with physical violence and so on also happens on the internet with sharing intimate photos and so on. So it's also really important that we teach children that in the same way that consent matters offline, at home, in schools, at the police station, consent is also important on the online spaces, and you need to respect privacy and consent there as well.
Exactly, and sometimes there's an issue like, I mean, kids are scared to open up about this to their parents. Maybe they feel like, okay, they would probably be questioned as to why do you have a social media account? It's all because of that you're facing this, you're encountering all these issues. So Bimali, what would you like to tell? I'm sure parents are tuned in as well, because sometimes the first thing they would say or do is blame the person who have been affected, the victim. So that's probably the reason why sometimes women don't open up about issues on social media. As Senel did mention, sharing photographs, intimate photographs, and messaging unnecessarily is also a form of harassment. So what's your take on this, Bimali? What would you like to tell the parents?
Yeah, so we are in an age, in the new normal actually, where we need internet, we need technology, but we need to know how do we use that technology, for good or for our own destruction, as I would say it. You know, because
everything has its ups and downs.
Everything has. So actually, see what is positive. We have to be online. We have various meetings online, back to back sometimes, because we don't have to have travel time now. So even students are learning online, and there is so much of knowledge at your fingertips. So which knowledge do we access? And as parents, we need to know, and I have a mother of 2 sons, and we need to know what they're watching. It's very important that we see, and we are interested to know what really they would like to see. Because when they are having online classes, they may also see an online game. See, this is the online platform now. It's like when you go to school, you'll be also not only studying, you'll be playing. So you see, but what type of games are you playing? Are you bullying? Are you harassing? What type of things are you exchanging? Those have to be monitored in the school environment. So what has happened is that has come home now. There's a bigger role for parents to play because it happens at home. So actually our work has got more and so you know our monitoring has to be more, how we speak to our children, because they have so many other, they don't have their friends. So we have to go an extra mile. And we also need to kind of communicate with each other so that we don't get annoyed with each other.
We have to make them comfortable.
Yeah, not only children, like even between a husband and a wife, because it's very stressful when you work at home, you have office work, you have children's work. So we need to recognize that we are in a different mode of working and try to communicate to each other that these are the spaces, this is where we will support, that's where you will support, and iron out issues that are maybe affecting us, so that we don't go into a worse scenario where we continue to be silent, not speak out, because actually there is, even the ministry is having online counseling now, and women in need, there's Women Development Center, there are many NGOs and the state apparatus that is supporting. So access them. Do not wait for things to surmount, and cyber violence, as was mentioned, is a huge issue as well, but we really need to know what our children are doing and watching. It's very important.
Exactly. Now, speaking of cyber violence, I see the term hashtag here, so I presume you can answer more questions on cyber. And sometimes kids don't realize that this is violence. They don't understand whether this is something which should be complained, because it might look as simple as a message. So what would you like to tell the youngsters out there? Some advice.
Sure. I think, as Bimali said, we need advice both for the youngsters but also the parents right here. I think parents also have a huge responsibility, and Bimali said this as well, that if something, if the kid is going through something, and of course I'm saying this not as, I don't have children myself, but maybe someone who was a young person many years ago, I think parents should be able, if a child is going through something, they should be able to come to their parents and talk about it. But what often I think some children worry is the same re-victimization that you spoke about. They worry that it will come from their own parents, so then they hide it. I think children should be able to come to their parents and say, look, this happened to me, and how do we get out of this situation? Second of all, I think through our education system as well, we need to train these skills from young people. We often, for ICT and so on, we learn about Microsoft Word and all of these skills, but how do we stay critical in this digital age? How do we use this information carefully? How do we use social media with care? And also the third thing is basically teaching everyone, but especially boys, that you need to respect boundaries online as well. In the same way, you can't just follow a girl everywhere offline on the train station and the bus station and buck them. You also can't keep messaging them online on WhatsApp. You can't, if they share something with you in confidence, like a photo, you can't share it with all of your friends, because in the same way, you need to respect consent there as well. I think all those three are super important.
Any advice to the youngsters as someone who's bringing up two young boys?
Yes, so actually for girls, actually, you don't need to share. Why do we share photographs, our own personal photographs? We have to be very careful. We have to learn to say no, and to stand and to speak up. It's very important, because I think we are so used to saying, okay, because he asked, he loves me, I have to share this photograph. No, that doesn't have to happen. And I think you have to use and make your own decisions on what is really good for you. And secondly, actually, we have, for parents, access those helplines. And as UNDP, we have done a lot of work, and as UN agencies, on addressing gender-based violence with the Ministry of Women and Child Affairs and with NGOs. We actually support shelters for women who have undergone domestic violence, and some for many years endure violence. And we ask you to access the helplines that are there and not to suffer in silence. So that's very important, and that's the message, and I would give girls and the women and men, and not to kind of tolerates. We actually have a zero tolerance policy on gender-based violence. So have that policy, uphold that policy in your life, at work, and so that you will have a positive relationship at home and out when you work in your workplaces as well, because harassment happens even in public transport. It's there, so it's very important.
Exactly. I think I'm sure many out there would have understood the fact that sometimes sharing photographs is obviously, whenever you share it, even on social media, it doesn't have to be to anyone in particular. We've got to think twice as to what we are putting on a public platform. And sometimes, Bimali, as you mentioned, it's not necessary for a lady to share a photograph, but out of love they might share, but things won't work out probably after some years, and then sometimes what happens is the other party tries to take advantage, but that was shared out of trust.
Yeah.
So what do they do now?
Also it is a type of photograph that is shared, It's not just a normal, so there are requests made to go beyond a normal photograph. So I would say, that is not acceptable. Especially, that those are things that women really need to say no. And one of the things is to ensure that we are able to say that and empower our girls to say that. And actually, violence should not be condoned anywhere by men or women, girls or boys. And women should not be the ones to say, yes, it's okay. It's not okay.
Certainly not. And your message, because we've come towards the latter part of the show, your message to the public.
I think maybe my message is for other men and boys.
Okay.
I think when we encounter gender-based violence in our day-to-day lives, I think all of us have a responsibility to stand up for it and say no. I think especially as men, we have that responsibility to confront other men who engage in this type of violence and say no as well. And sometimes for me as well in my everyday life, it's easier for me to talk about the importance of gender-based violence here on this show than when we are hanging out with friends and someone says that sexist joke, to just stop him there and be like, no, that's
easier
not
said
cool.
than done.
It's easier said than done because it gets awkward, then you lose friendships. But I think it is important. All of us need to take a position, because if we don't do it, then we're not living up to the expectations that we're talking about. So all of us have that responsibility to stand up and say no when these things happen.
Bimali?
Yes, so actually we are part of the taking forward a national plan on action with the ministry, and these are important policy decisions have to be made by institutions when they make a stand. And these actually trickle down to the community and to our homes. So as parents, know what your children are doing, know what they are watching, and be close to your children, communicate with them and together. And as husbands and wives, speak to each other, communicate to each other if something is not right, seek help from another person. We see only the woman seeking help from outsiders, but men too need to do that, and to access whatever required counseling, legal support that's given, access them. Do not wait and suffer in silence. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bimali, and thank you very much, Sanal. It was really nice talking to both of you. Thank you. And today's topic was on media and gender-based violence on Equal Partners. See you again on the next episode.